Perhaps one of the more controversial developments of late in the city has been around the master planning of our CBD and trying to get that space of the city working, and that's been the reopening of City Place, and now there's buses going through Lake Street, and there's a more defined, legible space happening between the Esplanade and the Cairns Central Shopping Centre. Could I get you to reflect on some of the principles of good design that are happening in that place, because some of them seem counterintuitive. But could I also get you to reflect on some of the challenges in that space? What do you think we're doing well, and what could be improved?
Shield Street will be redeveloped from Grafton Street all the way down to the Esplanade in 3 separate stages, and that's to minimise the impact on the trading community as well as accessibility for the general public. We can't shut down the whole central spine of the city in one go, so it's a project which will roll out over a number of years, stage by stage. Starting with stage 1, which is Grafton Street to Lake Street.
I believe Cairns as a city actually has quite a high usage of public transport, or buses, and so instead of trying to get the buses in and out of those interchanges, the idea was to move them through Lake Street, but as a shared zone thing. And there was quite a lot of opposition to that when it was being proposed. But I think the solution that they've done works really well, because it actually does give quite a good shared space, and it actually frees up pretty much the 2 areas of space, between Abboton Lake and Lake and Grafton to make them into really nice sort of urban places.
So I couldn't quite understand why a plaza that, maybe just a street crossing in this instance, that was already established would be given back to traffic. And I probably have been fighting with that for quite a while. And I'm still not sure that the solution that is there is actually working. Having said all that, I think I do understand that in Cairns, the car still is very important, and that I can't project my European thinking onto a Cairns local. So I would have wanted to see it completely pedestrianised from Cairns Central down to the Esplanade. In short, I would have thought that would have been the best outcome. But I probably think now that it's not working, and what has been developed at the moment has the potential to one day become that and become more pedestrianised. But for the moment, it's really about activating the city and making sure that people come back into town. And if that means the car is still one of our major keys to make that happen, then so be it.
I'm probably in 2 minds about it. I would like to wait and see what the end product looks like. It feels quite hard-surfaced to me at the moment in what's being developed. Having said that, it's lovely to see the level of interpretive signage and interpretive built-in art and just objects increasing in the city centre. And I think that's really important, because tourists pay attention to that stuff, and people, even I, stop and read it, So it's lovely to have more of those human scale, tactile things that you can look at and read and touch that tell you about the place where you're living.
And we've focused on it being a place where Indigenous people can engage with the artworks and showcase their artistic talents, but also considerations being placed on how the space might be used. For example, there's a series of raised garden mounds as you walk up Shield Street, and they're designed to make people pause, take their shoes off, get the grass between their toes, and to sit down and take the time. And that's something which resonates with Indigenous people, to be able to stop and feel the natural environment in a built-up place like Shield Street.
Now, in terms of the Shield Street redevelopment, I've been really interested in watching how that comes about. I was walking through there the other day and I was so amazed to see these grassy knolls. A note from the debate years ago when they were first talking about ripping up the old city place and redeveloping it to what it is now, and everybody was up in arms about it. And one of the things they were saying is, you know, the council systematically has destroyed this piece of, you know, the heart of Cairns. And one of the things they were really unhappy about was the fact that in the olden days they used to have these grassy knolls where you could lie around and listen to bands and relax in the centre of the city, and that over time all of those had been taken out and it had become this horrible hot basin of depravity. It was just awful. And it was interesting to see how now they've taken what people really reminisced and loved about that place in a lot of ways, and they're starting to put it back.
There used to be very bizarre walkways. They connected across all 4 squares so that you were able to walk across the road, Shield Street and Lake Street, and stay dry. And novel and tropical. We would traditionally, hopefully, have kept the big old figs and used those trees to make the coolness. And there are still some great fig trees there, and as you walk down the street, you immediately feel degrees cooler, 5 degrees cooler, and it's just so, it's still so surprising to me how different things feel when you're under a tree. So that's definitely one of those ingredients of tropical urbanism that we need to do well to distinguish ourselves, make ourselves memorable.
Well, Shield Street's taken its inspiration from the way that the street was historically used. Shield Street's always been a place where Indigenous people have gathered and come together to meet, catch up with friends and family. Cairns is unique in that it's a hub for Indigenous people from right up to the Cape, as well as the surrounding communities down south. Indigenous people have come to Cairns for a number of reasons, for education, for work, for family reasons, but we have quite a diverse culture. And in a way, it's quite lovely that Cairns Regional Council's recognised that history of Shield Street being a communal place, not for Indigenous people, but a shared space where people come together. And that's a really nice starting point for a public artwork. And that story is quite a simple one in terms of people coming together to catch up and to meet. But it is a lovely story to base as a platform to recreate that space and to give the local Indigenous community ownership of this space again. And people come to Cairns from countries all over the world, and they're really interested in being able to immerse themselves in Indigenous culture and learn more about the local people. So we're trying to showcase broadly the talent that we have here in Cairns and use that story as a gathering place to build a suite of public art which is representative not of just one cultural group, but a broad look at the visual arts practice and the cultural practice of Indigenous people in Cairns.
The notion of opening up Lake Street to improve the legibility of movement of vehicles and people through the city was important. The notion of connecting Cairns Central through to the Esplanade along Shield Street was important. Shield Street is already recognised as a significant pedestrian space in the city. It's got a really important cultural overlay, a cultural heritage overlay that defines the amount of building that can happen along it, and it's a really major pedestrian link. So the architects had the opportunity in this instance, and the planners, to tell the story of where Cairns sits. And when you move down Lake Street and Shield Street, you pick up the story of the rainforest, and you pick up the story of Lake Street, and you pick up the story of the Great Barrier Reef, all significant pieces of the Cairns puzzle.
You know, looking at all the features that have been created, sort of informal seating, retaining all the large trees, adding more landscaping, to me, it has got all the right ingredients. Seems to be quite legible as well. So from a tourist point of view, I think orientation has been improved. Lots more signage, not just in a probably freestanding sign, but more integrated into furniture and sort of the footpath. So yeah, I think it's the right way forward, and it seems to be connecting people away from the waterfront to other precincts, or it seems to be connecting destinations to other precincts.
The Shield Street now is a major link between that facility and the Esplanade. So the work in the CBD Master Plan was just about reinforcing that and making the pedestrian movement through it and adding some more adding more trees to the space. The second part of that master plan and the view of the city was the opportunity to put landscaping back into the city as much as we can. And one of the reasons I was saying before that the trees weren't replaced because they were generally planted on the verge of the street, and that creates a real conflict or a perceived conflict with the traders, that the retail traders, that they lose visibility of their retail spaces from the trees cluttering them. So with the opportunity that we've got great big wide streets, we can put the trees in the middle of the street. And putting the trees in the middle of the street does two really fantastically important things. It avoids the argument from the retailers that their signage is being blocked, but it also starts to narrow down the streets. I've said before that our streets are twice the width of most city streets in Australia. They're really wide and they're cumbersome and they're difficult for pedestrians to move through. So the opportunity to put trees through the middle of the streets breaks down the width of the streets, and it does the thing that that trees do to cities is it provides shade and the perception of coolness.
The new city place, it's got fantastic water bubblers, and just that thing of water bubblers, it means that all of a sudden we aren't maybe buying as many bottled waters and we're being a bit more sustainable. But then with a water bubbler, I like to see a seat. That's myself. There are very few seats in the town that aren't associated with a restaurant or a cafe, and if they are, they're invariably not in the shade. So for myself, I think seating is something that the new city being Lake Street and Shield Street could do better, but at the same time, you know what they've done so well? They've made mounds of grass. So there's it's tactile and it's shady, and you can lean back on it or you can sit up on it. It's easy.
You may remember the winding bench seats, low concrete bench seats, which were underneath the fig trees in Shield Street. Central point for people gathering and sitting and enjoying the city. We've kept the structure of those bench seats and resurfaced them, and now we've commissioned images from a number of artists in the Yarrabah community, which explore the landscape, the rainforest, and they're pictorially interpreting their place. And we've been able to adapt those images into large sweeping repeated patterns, which will be interpreted in glass mosaic, all hand cut with over 1 million individual tiles to make up the designs.
But it's also, because it's a public transport space, there's a great opportunity to tell lots of stories, because a lot of visitors move through the city. So it's a really good space to have a lot of interpretive and information about the city, and that has been really successfully implanted through the Lake Street, Shield Street development. It's also brought in shading from the rain and the sun, which is vital to moving through the city. And it's done it in a manner that really reminds us that we're in the tropics. Because another thing about living in the tropics is the way the light works, and the light of the tropics is really dappled. This space is always dappled light. The rainforest is filled with dappled light. So the way the architects in Lake Street have managed that is they've built these shade structures which create dappled light. They're not making a rainforest, but they're reminding us about, when we move through it, that we live in this space with dappled light. And people moving through it probably aren't even aware. They're not even conscious of the notion that they're thinking we're moving through a rainforest dappled environment.
There's fantastic bus shelters, and I know that the council and the Urban Design Advisory Board, which I was on, had agonised over what would be a good bus stop. And I travel the world looking at them because, and Darwin does them quite well, and they're really boring concrete ones, but they've got a curve like that and a curve like that, and you move to which side's not sunny or not rainy, and it works. But we've gone and made these magnificent light structures that have cut out stencils of tropical vegetation and then put a clear perspex over the top.
One of the things I'm a little disappointed about, and I don't know if it's going to come or not, was that one of the things that seemed really important in the very, very old city place from years ago was a water feature, because I understand that the water was, the reason it was actually even called Lake Street maybe, was because of some sort of water that used to be there, and that was really important to the Indigenous people in the area. It's a really important site from what I understand. And so I hope that this new redevelopment does actually bring in some water feature as an ode to what was there originally.
For me, one of the issues with the city centre is a lack of commercial activity. It's not about what it looks like, it's about the fact that Cairns Central is now where the railway station is, and that when the inner city of Cairns had the large department stores and other things in the middle of town, it was a lot more vibrant and activated. Everyone, if they're in the middle of the city, they tend to end up going to the large shopping centre on, down the road on Sheridan Street. So I still think there's an activation problem with Lake Street as a place.
I would say that probably the city centre redevelopment has been really beneficial for Cairns. Everybody who goes there, even the sceptics, I think, love it now. And I think probably keeping the trees was really important. And I know that the whole vegetation in the city poses a lot of challenges in terms of wildlife management and cyclone projectile hazards and things like that. But I think the benefits that it brings the city far, far outweigh the costs of those other things. And I think that's a really important thing to think about as you're walking through. It's cooler. It feels like Cairns. It's got a fig tree. It's not full of palm trees that offer no shade. It does actually feel cooler in those places with those grassy knolls.
So right now, materials have really enabled urban designers, city folk, all of us to lift our game without even trying. We can just sell the message of who we are through contemporary material as much as design. So the utensils have changed for us, and you walk down the street and you see pictures on bins, the old cars or the old building where this new building is. It immediately connects you as a local or a visitor or a new local to your place, and you start to feel, oh, I understand where I am. This is a tropical place. I am using the visual cues, the visual appropriateness of that urban design to navigate my way through the streetscape. It also helps me understand how to relate to the people in my town. It's tropical. You slow down your walk, you slow down your talk, just for the heat. You slow down, you slow down your clothes. You don't wear as much. You may wear no shoes at all. Those things are the visual cues that connect you to your place and help you understand how to belong here.